There's a reason I'm afraid of robots. Here's why. All right, so you're gonna watch this robot. His buddy can't get through the door. So another one comes in with an arm, sticks his leg in the door, holds it for his friend. Boston Dynamics posted this video to YouTube yesterday. The company's mission is to build the most advanced robots on Earth with remarkable mobility, agility, dexterity, and speed. Nightmare-inducing powers are just a bonus.
Now, switching gears now, in a major technological feat, Chinese scientists have successfully cloned monkeys for the first time.
I'm really astonished that they were able to make this happen.
What makes it so astonishing?
More than 20 years we knew that you could clone sheep and horses and cats, but despite several attempts, everybody failed when cloning monkeys.
There has been a big scientific breakthrough that may bring the world one step closer to cloning humans.
The barrier of cloning primate species is now overcome. In principle, any primate, including human, can be cloned.
22 years ago, Dolly the sheep became the first mammal cloned from an adult, followed by nearly 24 more mammals, including dogs, cows, and pigs.
Scientists have cloned dogs, cats, pigs, cows, embryos. It's not super efficient, this monkey thing. I think they did...
This monkey business?
This monkey business?
Okay.
Get out of here. I think they said it took hundreds of eggs.
Yeah, I think it was like 127 and they got 2 working eggs out of it.
Wow. Yeah, that's not great, but they still got 2, right? Sure. Are we creeped out by this or are we excited by the possibilities?
Yes. Right? What is the end game? I know people say they don't want to clone humans, but you think about, I don't know, the black market. Maybe there would be like some rogue nation state that wants to clone a whole army. I'm serious. It's crazy stuff.
But the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, are calling it a, quote, horror show, a waste of lives, time.
By the time I'm going to be able to have children, I'll even be able to decide the height, the intelligence, and any desired trait. This sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Being able to design your perfect child. Actually, being able to design generations and generations. But who is giving consent to this? Certainly not the unborn baby.
Is there a chance down the road that people, I want everybody to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed?
There is a chance down the road. And again, it's sort of like saying, should we not develop surgery because someday you'll be able to have your nose fixed, when all the time through we've been taking out appendices and saving lives. So it's just a matter of degrees. So yes, it will come to that. We're actually beginning that now, and we're going after eye color.
We have the technology to play God, to mess with nature. It's called CRISPR. What a funny name. With CRISPR, we can cut out undesired parts of DNA and replace them with arbitrarily generated desirable traits. Does it still sound like a dream?
So that's a big, big deal.
So what exactly is CRISPR, and what is the significance of this?
It's actually CRISPR-Cas9. It's a technology that was actually discovered by accident, where we've known about DNA for a long, long time now. We know it controls almost everything about us, but we couldn't do anything to fix it.
I think a couple months ago, Wired magazine wrote that CRISPR had, quote, done for biology what the Model T Ford did for manufacturing. It democratized access to a revolutionary technology. So to be clear, at this point, we're still talking about a technology that's, relatively easy to use if you're a student in a lab, not just a guy on the street. But still, it means that a lot more people can now do gene editing. And that trend is probably only going to continue. Whether we want to stop that is probably moot. At this point, the genie is out of the bottle.
This reality seems far away, almost as if it was a post-apocalyptic movie plot. But It's actually closer than what you might imagine. Experimenters in China have already tested this technology on human embryos. Now, it did not go too well, but these are only the early stages of the trial.
This is a big deal,
It's a big, big deal, perhaps one of the biggest deals in the last century.
but also controversial.
Extremely controversial because, again, we can fix people, but we don't necessarily fix their children. In other words, they can pass these diseases on. This is the first time that we're making changes that can persist in the germline. So whatever changes we make is not going away. So we've got to be very careful about what's done.
The first child born from IVF came to light a little over 40 years ago. And since then, 5 million children have been born through that technology. 5 million in 4 decades. That's a lot.
So we're slowly treading our way towards the ultimate goal, which is fixing human beings and making things better.
These two female monkeys, Wah Wah and Zhang Zhang, are 7 and 8 weeks old and represent the next big step in cloning.
The study suggests that human cloning could technically be possible in the near future, raising serious ethical concerns. This watershed discovery will potentially lead to a brave new world of medical research.
These baby monkeys represent a major scientific breakthrough, the first primates to be successfully cloned.
Well, that's amazing, but I think it makes sense with all the scientific advances.
And speaking of things that we do want to keep an eye on, there's one CRISPR-based tool that I do want to talk more about because it's something that really has the potential to reshape our world, for better or worse, and that's a gene drive. So many of you will have heard of gene drives, but for those who haven't, a gene drive is a tool that drives a genetic change through a population.
Picture this. In 15 years, you and your partner have a normal child, which means that she is not genetically modified. Let's say her name is Maya. Your neighbors, on the other hand, decided to go down a different path and named their genetically modified daughter Emma. Now, Emma is smarter, prettier, more talented, and scientifically proven to be better than your child. She's the perfect child, perfectly designed, but there's always been something off about her. She has to go to a different school, lead a different life which is very different from that of your child's. I mean, after all, she's a designer baby, perhaps a trophy child. Emma lives just next door, and somehow you know that she never gets sick, she never gets hurt or trips easily. She's definitely an asset to the government, who will most likely never have to spend large sums of money for her health care. Well then, maybe even the government might start to promote the production of designer babies, and your little Maya will find herself alone, filled in a world with perfect humans. It wouldn't be the first time that the government controlled or tried to control childbirth, whether the number, the mental, or the physical qualities of the offspring. A modern example could be China's one-child policy. But I think that the most frightening example of eugenics was during the Nazi period. Hitler wanted a superior race, the Aryan race. He went through great lengths to achieve this, firstly by concentration camps, and then by sterilizing or executing individuals which he judged to be handicapped or cretins. Is this the world that you want your children to inherit? Is this what you want our race to become? And what if one day she comes back crying, asking, why am I not like Emma? All you know is that society has changed. Between your child and Emma, there's an abyss. A superior race has been born. and your child does not belong to it. It's time to ask ourselves really important questions like, who are we? What will we become, and who will decide?
We should be able to challenge people and ask that question. What is it that makes you and me and every single person absolutely equal? What is equally true and constant and cannot be lost about us, which grounds all of our political convictions? And hopefully that leads to some good conversations.
And John Polkinghorne was one of the leading quantum physicists of his time, remarkable professor. I'm sure you would know the name. And what I came to the conclusion about, ultimately it's not so much about the evidences, it's the willingness to go where the evidence leads. If you're really willing to go where the evidence leads, and if it calls for humility and the bending of your knee, the difference will actually and ultimately come there. You see, in the sciences, as a physicist or as a lab technician or whatever, science can tell you what happens when this is joined to that or when this is added to that. Nowhere in science does it tell the technician that they must tell the truth. That's not a scientific imperative, that is a metaphysical imperative. So immediately when you move from science into metaphysics, you come into the real world of why you love your children, why you wish to be loved, and why the truth matters.
And most importantly, who will draw that line?
This is a question that I get really excited to speak to, because I think there's often this assumption that somehow science has disproved God, somehow science has buried God. You ask specifically the question of how you can get someone to believe in things that aren't physical in nature. Well, there are lots of things like that in science and also in philosophy, which you mentioned. Gravity, numbers, sets, propositions. Most philosophers today are actually not materialists precisely because of some of these reasons. But my primary encouragement on this question would be, all right, meet people where they are. Let's start with the empirical then. Let's start with the sciences and let's ask that question. Has science pointed away from God?
We speak from the objective viewpoint that life has intrinsic worth and intrinsic value, not extrinsic worth conveyed by state or society, but intrinsic worth. We talk so much about human rights, we have forgotten about the right to be human. And so your point is very well taken. I commend you for thinking about that. I just think you speak as one who has a coherent worldview as to why this issue is important, not representing an institution, but representing the absolutes that have built your life, the absolute of dignity, of essential value, of life, of marriage, of home, and of the future.
Let me just take this one step further. The very basis of all science, the regularity of the universe, the fact that we can expect that in the next second and the next minute and tomorrow, gravity, for instance, is going to have exactly the same strength. Why do we just assume that? Somebody might say, well, that's the way it's always been. But that's not an answer, that's the question. Why has it always been the same? And why can we assume it's always going to be the same in the future with perfect regularity? I actually think on logic alone, you have no answer to that question. Einstein said the universe's incomprehensibility, the greatest incomprehensibility, is that it is comprehensible. Why do we have this regular universe that we can actually perform experiments on and discover scientifically? I think only God makes sense of that. And so bring that into the conversation. Maybe it's the case not only that science hasn't disproved God, but that only God proves science. I hope that's helpful.
Nicholas Wolterstorff, marvelous professor from Yale, after he lost his son and it crushed his heart, made this incredible comment: when we have overcome absence with phone calls, winglessness with airplanes, summer heat with air conditioning. When we have overcome all these and much more besides, then there will abide two things with which we must cope: the evil in our hearts and death. The answer to those two will not come from science. It comes from knowing the very creator of the universe, who explains your heart and raised his son from the dead for you and for me.